Good.
Thank you. I call this meeting to order. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council Township of North Huron accept the agenda for July 6th to 2020 council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? And just speak up, folks.
I'll move it.
I've got Rick and I've got Chris. Carson, you can take it away.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron accept the agenda for the July 6, 2020 council meeting as presented. So Deputy Reeve Sipe.
Yes.
Councillor Falconer.
Yes.
Councillor Heffer. Councillor Heffer.
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum. Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
Councillor McBurney.
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Closure of pecuniary interests. Again, please speak up. Not hearing any. Next is public comments. An opportunity for members of the public to speak to an item on business on the agenda. 2 minutes per person. And Carson has the ability to see if anyone's out there and would like to.
So yes, there are a few members on the line. So what I'll do is I'll mute them now, and then if anyone wants to speak to any agenda items, they can do so.
Okay. Are they muted, or unmuted, Carson?
Yep. So if we're not hearing any, then I guess we're good to move on.
Okay, thank you kindly. Consent agenda. The Council Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent agenda 5.1.1 and further that the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.2 to 5.3.2 for information. Do I have a mover?
Has joined the meeting.
Paul.
Paul moves. Seconder. Do I have a seconder?
Second that.
Okay, Chris has that. Anybody like to pull anything from the agenda there to talk about?
A participant has joined the meeting.
Not hearing any, I'm going to hand it over to Carson for the roll call.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I was just waiting for my computer to catch up here. So Councillor Heffer was the mover, and who was the seconder?
Chris.
Okay, thank you. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent item 5.1.1 and further that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.2 to 5.3.2 for information. So Councillor Falconer.
Yes.
Councillor Heffer.
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum. Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
Councillor McBurney.
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sipe. And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
There's 6, there's no public meetings or hearings tonight. 7 is reports. 7.1 is the clerk's department. 7.1.1 is a consent application for Reineke, and I apologize if I say that wrong. And I believe on this one, who wants to take this one away, Monica or Dwayne?
Through you, Your Worship. So that'll be Monica, and she has an accompanying presentation with that.
Okay. So I'm going to hand it over to you then, Monica.
Sure. I'm just bringing that presentation up now. Just bear with me for 1 second.
Just what she's doing that, Carson. Did I have a mover and a seconder for that?
Through you, Your Worship. So no, you don't have a mover and a seconder yet, but Monica, and I actually can put it up on my screen now if we just want to do that.
Oh, that would be great, Carson. Thank you.
Can everyone see the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, okay. Good evening, Council. Thank you very much to the clerk and to the Reeve for my introduction. The first presentation that I have for you tonight is consent application C89 for 19. So next slide, please. So this is an application from George and Lois Reinick, and their property is at 39906 Blythe Road. This is an application for a surplus farm residence severance. Next slide, please. So the area of the severance is approximately 5.7 acres. And on the next couple of slides after this one, you'll see the configuration of the severance. The area to be retained is approximately 60 acres. The property is just west of Blythe on Blythe Road, and the property is zoned AG1 and NE2, and it's designated in the township's official plan as agriculture with a small amount of community facility and natural environment. In the next slide, I'll show you the areas of the property and their land use designations. So this slide shows you the subject property outlined in orange, and the areas of land use designation. The area with no colors on it is designated agriculture. The green area at the back here is designated natural environment. And there's an area designated community facility that is added there. It was explained to me that this was an overflow area for the Blythe campground. It hasn't been used as an overflow area for several years, but it does show up in the township's official plan as being designated community facility. So I'll have us go to the next slide. In this next slide, you can see the area proposed for the severance. In this slide, it's saying 6 acres, but the proposal that from the applicant is actually to reduce the area on the west side down to this row of trees and to tuck the severance line in a little bit on this east side as well. The reason for that is the owner of the property has entered into an agreement with a purchaser for the cropland, and the purchaser is looking to buy at least 52 acres of workable land. And so the area of this severance is reduced down to about 5.7 acres. So it's a little bit less than what's showing here. On the next slide, you can see a photo of the home on the property. So this photo is taken standing at the highway and looking back at the severed house. And then the last 2 slides that I have here are just standing more or less in the same location and looking back to the east. You can see the campground in the distance there. And this last slide is looking to the west, and just from the end of the driveway looking west, you can see the retained lands to the west. So as I said, this is an application for surplus farm residence severance. I have reviewed the application with respect to the policies of the North Huron official plan, and the application conforms with all of the requirements of the township official plan. I'll also maybe note at this point that the agent, this is for the next one. I don't think there's anybody online to speak to this one. So yes, I would say that this application should be recommended by council for approval with the recommended conditions, including the conditions that the severed and retained lands will be automatically rezoned, that there'll be a payment of cash in lieu of parkland. And I believe for this one, the applicant has already satisfied the conditions for the building official. So I think those would be my comments on this application for now, and I'll leave it there in case council has any further questions.
Okay. Can I get a mover for consent application report file number C89-19?
Yeah, I'll move
Anita
that.
will move.
I have Rick, and I believe that was Anita. Seconded. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Carson.
Through your worship. So if there's no questions, the motion on the floor is that the council of the township of North Huron.
Sorry, Carson. Carson. Chris has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. A couple things that just interest. The orange land, the CF land, Monica, like, is it being purchased by the new owner?
Yes, it's part of it's actually used as cropland right now.
Okay.
And the new purchaser is interested in it as part of the cropland that he's purchasing.
And he's okay with the CF designation and all that, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And the other thing is, he has definitely bought the land?
He's entered into an agreement for purchase, and following the severance application, then they'll be able to complete that deal by register it in the new owner's name. So it's not until it gets final approval from the county can they actually make that land transaction happen. But yes, there is an agreement for purchase that's in place.
What happens then if the deal falls through?
Yeah, we have had that happen in these types of cases. It usually doesn't have to come back to North Huron or any kind of report back to local council. If it's just if the new purchaser is also a farmer who owns farmland with a house on it, and they'd be eligible to purchase the land as a surplus farm severance, then they just come back to the county with a change of conditions, and a new change of conditions report, kind of like a small memo, is written by the county planning director, and they can make that change. So when the deals fall through, has happened, we're able to do that pretty quickly in the planning department.
That's good. I wasn't zeroing in on this one in particular. It was more of an interest for any of them coming up in the future.
Yep.
Hey, thank you, Monica.
Anyone else have a question? I don't hear anybody speaking up, so now I will hand it over to you, Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby recommend approval of the consent application, file number C8919, owner applicant Garrett and Lois Rennick, property description, part of Lot 40 and part of Lot 41, concession 1, 22R 2063, parts 1 to 4, East Wawanosh, Township of North Huron, with the conditions set out in the Huron County Planning and Development Report presented by Monica Walker Bolton at the July 6, 2020 council meeting. So this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson? Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sype?
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey. So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. 7.1.2 is the consent application. We have file number 4020. And again, I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder.
Paul.
I'll move that.
I need a move seconder.
Paul.
Paul seconds it. Thank you. Now, questions or comments for this one?
Through your worship, so Monica has another presentation for that one as well.
Oh, goodness, I'm getting ahead of myself again tonight. Sorry, Monica.
No problem. Carson's going to bring that presentation up in just a moment, if he doesn't mind. So this is another application for surplus farm resident severance. And similarly to the last application that council heard, it's also a situation where the owners of the property wish to keep the home, and they've identified a farmer for whom the house is surplus. So similarly to the last application, the retained lands or the croplands will be registered in the name of a farmer for whom the house is surplus. So this is, next slide, please. This is application C42 for this year, 2020. Lloyd and Beverly Slateholm are the owners of the property, and the property is located on Belfast Road. Legal address is the east half of Lot 41, Concession 11 in East Wawanosh. Next slide, please. So in this case, the area being severed is a little smaller of an area, just 3 acres in area. And there will be 97 acres as the retained cropland. The property is zoned AG1 and NE2, and it's designated agriculture and natural environment limited protection, mostly agriculture with a small amount of natural environment at the back of the property, which you can see on the next slide. So here you can see this is along 100. There's a forested area at the back of the property, and the small green patch at the front of the property is where the severed area is, which you can see a lot better on the next slide. You'll be able to see the severed. So here is the 3-acre property that's proposed to be severed. You can see a bit of rough land at the back of the severed property. Looks like a barn was taken down. So on this severed property, there really aren't any accessory buildings in addition to the house. So the 3-acre property includes a little bit of area to the west that is currently cropped, but that's acceptable because it's already a small property and they don't have any existing outbuildings. So having a little bit of extra land to work with there to the west will allow a future owner of the property to build accessory buildings if they wish. So this is a reasonable request for an area of a severance, for a surplus farm residence severance. And I just have 1 or 2 more pictures that I took on my site inspection. Here you can see the home on the severed property. You will notice that there is a for sale sign out there in front of the home. I think the plan is to sell the retained lands to a farmer and possibly sell this house in the not too distant future. And the next slide will show you, just looking up the road, this is facing east from exactly the same spot where I took the photo of the house. You can look across to what would be the retained cropland stretching out to the west. So once again, this is an application for a surplus farm residence severed with respect to the policies of the township's official plan. The area of the severance is reasonable. The house meets the age requirements. There's been no previous severances from this property. The property will be automatically rezoned in accordance with the surplus severance policies. We're recommending the standard lot creation fee. In this case, the applicants have already provided an acceptable septic system inspection because the septic system is fairly new on the property. So the building official is satisfied with that requirement. I've recommended that an application for a new entrance for the field access be approved as a condition of this severance because there isn't currently an existing field entrance, although there's flat land in that location. So an extra entrance for the field shouldn't be too much of a challenge. So those would be my comments for this application for surplus severance, and it's my recommendation that council recommend this for approval.
Thank you, Monica. Now can I get a mover and a seconder?
Through you, your worship, you already have a mover and a seconder on this motion.
Sorry, guys, I've been up a few nights in a row. Few of you are aware of the situation here. I'll try to straighten my act up. Okay, in that case, I have questions. Do I have any questions, comments?
Reed Bailey.
Yes. Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, Monica, just wondering, the retained lands that has, looks like, workable lands or crop lands, is it of the interest? I understand, I'm not concerned about the value. I'm just wondering, does a person, person who sells that property, does a buyer have adequate potentially to farm? Like they can't put any more buildings on that. They can't put any farm buildings on that property. So would they have enough? Is that like look to be like rental land, or what is that actual property on the retained side, on the left-hand side, I guess, going to be used for?
Yeah. In most cases, it would turn into just yard for the surplus for the house. It isn't a large area that would be unless it was rented to the same farmer who was cropping the land. But that would probably, well, that could happen. The reason why we found it acceptable, in some cases, we would actually recommend that area not be included with the severance, because we try to preserve as much good farmland as possible. The discussion I had with my director about this was, if you think about it, in Huron County, we approve approximately 100 severances a year. And if each of those included an acre of extra cropland with them, we would be losing a full farm every year. So generally speaking, we usually do recommend that not be included with the severance. But in this case, there was some mitigating circumstances. One is that they appear to have included that to square off the lot to the edge of the property line. And that does offer an advantage because it's a more regular shaped lot. So that is a positive. The other thing that I noted is that they took down a barn on this property. So if the barn had been, the property severance would have been larger, including the barn at the back. In this case, they don't have the barn, and they don't have like a shop or a small hobby barn or any other accessory building. So having that extra land to the west might offer a future owner of the property a little bit more flexibility in terms of what they could build for accessory buildings. So with those sort of mitigating circumstances, we felt that it was acceptable the way that they've applied for it.
Thank you, Monica.
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, ask your follow-up question, Trevor.
Yeah, just a supplemental. It looks like in the overhead that piece of property has an entrance off the highway.
No.
Is that the case?
I didn't think so. I think I discussed that question with the agent for the applicant, and he didn't think that there was an existing field entrance. So that's one of the conditions that I've recommended for the severance, is that an approved entrance for the retained lands be sought for this as a condition of the approval.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Chris.
Yeah, I know this farm, and I was going to ask that of you, Monica, about an entrance in case somebody uses that extra acre for something else, and because that's the only way to get into the farm at this point. So another entrance is necessary. I like this severance. It's a good one.
Thank you, Christopher. Anyone else? Any questions or comments? Not hearing of any. I will, I believe, pass it over to Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby recommend approval of the consent application, file number 42-20, owner applicant Lloyd and Beverly Slightholme, property description, east half of lot 41, concession 11, East Wawanosh, Township of North Huron, with the conditions set out in the Huron County Planning and Development Report presented by Monica Walker-Bolton at the July 6, 2020 council meeting. So this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor Van Henderson?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve-Sight? Deputy Reeve-Sight, you just...
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Hepper?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. We're going to go on to 7.1.3 now, and this is site plan 2020-06. And Monica, would you like to speak to this one too?
Yes, I'd like to. Thank you, Reed Bailey. And Carson will probably bring that presentation up for me in a moment. So this is an application for site plan approval. Just before I launch into my comments on the site plan, I just wanted to note that staff have worked, and myself, if I can pat myself on the back, have worked diligently with the applicant in the past week or so to have this ready for tonight's council meeting. You know, every developer we work with is eager to get things dealt with in a timely manner. And with this item, there's just been a couple last minute tweaks and changes that I'll explain to council. But I'm really pleased that we do have this on tonight's council meeting agenda because I think it is a good development, and we're always eager to work with developers to move their applications along in a timely manner. So I hope that my explanation that I give tonight will make everything clear for council, and I'm certainly available to answer any questions that council might have. But with that, I'll just start at the beginning, and where there's any last minute changes, I'll point them out to you. So this is an application for site plan. In a site plan, we have, in this actually particular site plan, we have a site plan and a lot grading and drainage plan. So both plans go together along with an agreement to guide the development that's going to happen on the subject property. The owners of the property are Rod and Joan Kreitsch. Dan Kopflesch is the applicant on behalf of the builder, and the building is being constructed for Ideal Supply. So a business that currently exists in Wingham is moving across the street to the subject property. The location of the property is on the corner of Albert Street and Josephine, lots number 466 and 470 Josephine. That's known as Park Lot 12 in Registered Plan 410. And it's parts 5 and 6 in Reference Plan 22R6703. And then a couple slides from now, you'll be able to see the air photo where this is located in Wingham. But before I get to that, it's a proposal for a commercial building, a retail building in the highway commercial zone, in the highway commercial land use designation. It's located on the corner of Josephine and Albert Street West. And staff have reviewed the drainage plan and the site plan, including ourselves in planning. It's also been reviewed by the township's engineer, public works department, staff at North Huron, and planning. The next slide will give you a better idea of the location of the subject property. So two very important businesses, the LCBO and the beer store, and then this site in the middle of the two. So it's currently a vacant property, and these two lots that are highlighted, the orange lot and the blue lot together, go to make lots 466 and 470 Josephine Street, where the new Ideal Supply business is proposed to be located. So the first slide that I have for you next is the drainage plan. And, you know, on these slides, there's so much detail. It's impossible to walk you through all this, but the main point here is that this plan has been reviewed by the township's engineer, planning staff, public works, other staff, and there were a couple comments that have been addressed by the applicant, and one change that was made at the last moment. So in the front entrance of the building, the plan that you see here shows a graded ramp up to the front door to allow wheelchair access. And the change that was made at this morning at about 8:30, there's a new plan that instead of making a grade of a ramp up to meet the curb, the applicant is proposing to cut out the curb so that the wheelchair access can be provided at grade. So that's the only change that's been made to this plan that you see here. So that small change is reflected in the latest version of the site plan and grading plans that have been submitted by the applicant. And provided that council is okay with that change, staff and planning department are okay with that change. The last drawing is the site plan. So there's a lot of statistics and details at the right-hand side of this drawing, but the image at the upper left-hand corner of this drawing is what we review in terms of issues like setbacks, adequate parking, landscaping, sight lines. These are the types of things that planning and township staff review to ensure that the application is acceptable. Also, I should mention Huron County Public Works has commented on this site plan as well because of the Highway 4 going through Wingham. So all of those agencies consulted are in agreement that the site plans are acceptable and are recommending that council enter into an agreement with the property owner to have the development proceed according to these plans. Like I say, the only change from the plans that I'm showing here in my slideshow to the plans that that we have on file from the applicant that we received this morning is the change from a ramp that grades up to the door has been changed to a curb cut to allow wheelchair access. So I hope that explanation of the change is clear, and that the summary is that township staff, engineering, public works, Huron County Public Works are all in agreement that the application is acceptable. And I guess I should also mention this has been reviewed by the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority because the application is within an area that's regulated by them due to flooding hazards. And MVCA has also provided supportive comments. One other agency that was consulted was the Drinking Water Source Protection Risk Management Official. The Ideal Supply has agreed to not include any of certain hazardous materials in their business in compliance with drinking water protection because this property is within 100 meters of the municipal water well. So that agency is also in support of the development. So with all the agencies being in support and with the plans having been received up to date in a manner that's acceptable to ourselves, we would recommend that council enter into an agreement to ensure that development proceeds according to these plans.
Thank you, Monica. So 7.1.3, 2020-6006 site. Do I have a mover?
I'll move it, Chris.
You don't have a mover yet.
No, I'm at. Chris is going to move. Seconder?
Deputy Reeve is going to second it.
Yep. Deputy Reeve site seconds it. I'm going to open it up to questions and comments now. Not hearing any. I'm going to hand it over to Carson for roll call.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby approves the Rod Critch and Joan Critch proposed development as it applies to 466 and 470 Josephine Street, Park Lot 12, Registered Plan 410, Parts 5 and 6, Reference Plan 22R6303, Wingham, Township of North Huron. And further, that Council deems the adoption of bylaw number 44-2020 to be time sensitive and approves an exception to the section 19.1 of the procedure bylaw, allowing for bylaw number 44-2020 to be adopted at the July 6, 2020 regular meeting. So this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight?
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you kindly, Carson. 7.1.4, and this is enabling excess fund grant application Sean, did you want to talk to that before we call?
To your worship, that's actually my report.
Oh, I do apologize, Carson.
That's okay.
Hey, Carson, would you like to speak to this?
Sure. Thank you, your worship. So this report is pretty straightforward. Basically, Employment and Social Development Canada has an intake out right now for accessibility funding, and basically this funding is designed to help fund projects that make Canadian communities more accessible. Under the small projects component of this this intake, basically municipalities, businesses, not-for-profits could apply up to $100,000 for accessibility funds. And it was just noted that our construction projects for ramps, accessible doors, and accessible washrooms are given priority. And so when staff were looking at the criteria and the eligibility, we thought that this would fit very well with the phase 2 accessibility plans that were previously noted in the future consideration section of Sean's report at the June 1st meeting. And so just to recap those, basically what that would look like is an accessible ramp into the north set of doors at the front of Town Hall, as well as accessible doors for both external sets and an accessible set of doors in the main set of doors. The second set of doors into those buildings would be classified as internal doors. And so basically we thought that that project fit well with the criteria of this application. And the one thing I want to note is, so when we were looking at that application criteria, basically ESDC on their website says that ESDC will use a first come, first served process for assessing applications for ramps, accessible doors, and accessible washrooms. We will consider other project activities for funding after the call on July 13th, 2020 closes. So basically what that's saying is, if you are applying for an accessible ramp, door, or washroom, basically that's the bulk of the application. So it's first come, first serve, where any other application being submitted they'll basically evaluate it on its merits after the deadline. So when we saw that, basically, we went ahead and submitted the application just so we could get it in as soon as possible. The one thing to note is that council is in no way obligated to go through with this project, even if we were to receive the funding. Basically, what would happen next is a transfer payment agreement would come forward with the federal government, and council, if is in favor, would enter into that transfer payment agreement. From that time, we would have 24 months to complete the project. But the other thing to note is the designs and all that would come forward in a future report as well, right? So in a future staff report, it would outline what the proposed design would look like, what the overall cost would be, who we would be contracting to do that work. And so basically at this point, no decisions are to be made. This report is basically for information to tell council that we did apply for $100,000 worth of funding. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see whether we're successful or not. If we are successful, we would bring forward another report outlining what that project might potentially look like.
Thank you, Carson. Can I get a mover for that?
Paul.
Paul moves, seconder. Seconder, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll second that, Kevin.
Kevin seconds it. I'll hand it over to Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So if there's no questions, the motion on the floor is that.
Sorry, I forgot the question. I apologize. Chris and then Anita.
I'm happy that we're able to partake in this. What about other stores, restaurants down our main street? Are we obliged at all to try and help others because we know more information than most? Is that the BIA? I was just wondering because I know that there's probably some folks that could use some financial help.
So I can answer that for you if you want, Chris. Through the Economic Development Committee, we have, and I believe it's going to come up a little further in the meeting too, there's going to be a change. We can help source money for them through the Economic Development meeting, and it's called the Main Store. Trevor, help me out here.
Through your worship. So that report you're referring to, that's what we've already used to fund our CIP projects.
Yeah.
So I guess to Councillor Palmer's point, Reeve Bailey is right. With our CIP applications, a lot of them have been using those funds for accessibility, which is one way to help. But the other good point you raised, Councillor Palmer, is making our businesses aware. So this intake is businesses are eligible as well. So we can definitely reach out to whether through the BIAs tomorrow to let them know that there is funding available that they might be eligible for. So that is definitely a good point, Councillor Palmer, and we will follow up with that.
Thank
Good
you.
question, Chris. Go ahead, Anita.
No, I didn't have a question.
Oh, sorry. Anyone else have questions or concerns? Okay, and I believe I already have the movers, so I'll hand it over to Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the clerk dated July 6, 2020 regarding the Enabling Accessibility Fund grant application submission for information purposes. So Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight?
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heffert?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson? Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you kindly. 7.1.5, this is the downtown Main Street Revitalization Funds relocation. Carson, I believe you want to speak to this one. I'm going to have you speak to it before I ask for a mover or a second.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, as Reeve Bailey had mentioned, Council will be aware that our downtown Main Street revitalization funds, we were previously using that $42,000 plus that we had received through AMO, which was actually through OMAFRA. We received that in 2018, and we had used that since to fund our CIP projects, where we had funded 11 different projects as of March of 2020. So basically, this report is more of a financial exercise to just shift some funds around in order to allow for our businesses time to complete the project. So basically, when the downtown Main Street revitalization funds came forward, there were two streams that could be used for the funds. One is the community improvement project stream, which as council will be aware, North Huron used, and the other is the municipal infrastructure stream, which is basically you could use it for municipal infrastructure projects that met a certain set of criteria, like it being downtown, that kind of thing. So as I mentioned, council had previously approved 12 or 11 projects and by the March 2020 deadline. So with that, what ended up happening is North Huron entered into an agreement with AMO for the funds, and AMO entered into an agreement with OMAFRA to distribute the funds. And so in our agreement with AMO, the one thing that wasn't entirely clear was whether the funds had to be spent by March of 2020 or whether they just had to be allocated. And so Dwayne had reached out to AMO in, I believe, June of 2019 to ask this question, and the response we got back is basically the funds did not have to be spent. They just had to basically be allocated. However, after the deadline of March 2020, we submitted the final report to AMO that we were required to submit. And basically at this time, AMO reached out to us and said, you actually had to have them all spent.
A participant
Completed
has
by the
left the
March
meeting.
2020 deadline. So as I'm sure you could imagine, we immediately reached out to AMO. Turns out we were not the only municipality in this boat. Pretty much any municipality who did the CIP stream had not allocated their funds. So there was confusion on the part between AMO and the various municipalities. So basically AMO went back to OMAFRA and asked, can we get an extension? Because a lot of our municipalities didn't complete the projects. And basically at that time, we got an extension for these projects until October 31st of 2020. So what we did then is we reached out to our various CIP approved projects to see, well, are you able to meet this October 31st deadline? Because we had originally allocated them 18 months under our CIP. And through that research, all the municipalities are able, or all the projects are able to meet that October 31st deadline, except for one, which is the Hotel Lux project that was noted in the report. Basically, they said that they would require the full 18 months, which basically puts them at a deadline of May of 2021. So the other thing to note is that another one of our projects said they were no longer going forward due to COVID-19. They just had the extra funds to allow for their half. And for that reason, they said, go ahead and reallocate the funds to a project that could go ahead and meet that October deadline. So two things to note here, I guess. One, we need to reallocate it's $3,928 from the project that can't go forward due to COVID-19. And the other one is we then reached out to AMO to see what we could do to help this one project fund themselves, even though they couldn't meet your new October deadline. And basically they said, you have an infrastructure project that would apply, that would meet the criteria. You could use that $10,000 that was originally allocated in your budget and use that to fund the Hotel Lux project. And then the $10,000 of the Main Street funds that was going to go to Hotel Lux could basically be used to offset to be used for that project instead. So we looked at our projects in the budget, and luckily for us, the town hall accessibility and COVID-19 renovations meets the criteria of the infrastructure stream. So basically what we were doing, and that's where, I mean, it's literally just a financial exercise, is the $10,000 of the Main Street funds would be applied to that project, which is already approved by council. And then $10,000 of the funds that were originally approved by council to go to that project, we would instead use those to fund the Hotel Lux project. That way it gives them that 5 or so extra months to meet the timelines to get their project done. So recommendation is basically that council approves the reallocation of the funds as set out in the report. And as you will have seen in the financial impact section of the report, there was a chart there summarizing the funds reallocations.
Thank you very kindly, Carson. Before I ask for questions, I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder. Do I have a mover?
I'll move it.
I have Rick moving, seconder.
Deputy Reeve.
Deputy Reeves, Sipes. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to hand it back over to you, Carson. Oh, sorry, questions. Sorry, questions. Oh, there's no questions this time. Okay, Carson. You get her again.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the clerk dated July 6, 2020 regarding the Downtown Main Street Revitalization Funds reallocation for information purposes. And further, that council approves the reallocation of funds as set out in staff report number CL 2020-15 presented by Carson Lamb, clerk at the July 6, 2020 regular council meeting. This will be a recorded vote. So Deputy Reeve Syke.
Yes.
Councillor Falk.
Yes.
Councillor Heffer. Councillor Van Hitterson.
Yes.
Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
Councillor Palmer, sorry, I just didn't get that.
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes,
So that motion carries 7-0.
thank you. Just want to point out something to council, and I'm sure you've noticed as well as I have already today in our meeting today, there are 2 items that our staff went above and beyond. They didn't have to. They could have let this type of stuff slide. We are so grateful for the staff we have, at least I am, and I'm sure my whole council is. Just wanted to point out those are 2 that could have never appeared, but these guys took the time, and these ladies and gentlemen took the time to look into them. Thank you very kindly. Speaking of taking the time, we're going to go to Finance Department for the penalty and interest update, and I'm going to have Donna speak to this before I ask for a mover and seconder.
Thank you, Your Worship. Having some computer troubles this evening.
Good here, Donna.
Okay, thank you. So basically, over the last few months, the township has provided relief in the form of no penalty being charged on current taxes and no late charge on the water and sewer bills. So that we have provided this 90-day relief where those amounts were waived, and the amounts are outlined in the report. And I wanted to give an update. When I had to file my report to make it onto the agenda, the percentage as at that point was 8.87 for outstanding taxes at the time of writing report. But a number of payments have come in over the last couple of days. And the percentage last year at this time, as per the report, was 7.02%. And as at today, it's down to 7.43%. So very, very close to last year, which indicates to me that, and then of course, like the amount of taxes have gone up from one year to the other. So indicates to me that the payments have come in very well, as we had hoped they would. And so at this point, unless council would like to have further discussion on further deferral of late charges and penalty charges, the direction that we had before was that we would begin on July 1st to add those penalty charges to unpaid current taxes, and then later on in July add the late charges to the water and sewer billing. So does council have any questions, or would you like to have some further discussion on further deferral?
Just going to get a mover and a seconder on that first, Donna, and then I'll
Yes,
have
thank
them open it up to questions. If it's okay. Okay, so can I have a mover for that?
Paul.
Paul moves, seconder.
Kevin.
Kevin seconds. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, let's open that up to questions and comments if there are any. Go ahead.
Chris.
Go ahead, Chris.
Just one through you, Reeve. Donna, I'm just wondering, if we go with this, will the late charges just be as of the last month, the new month? How are you going to determine it?
Yeah, so our plan had been to actually waive those penalties for the months of April, May, and June. So there would not be anything applied for those months. It would be 0%.
Okay.
They would resume as normal on July 1st. And so for the anyone who hadn't paid their June 26th taxes, or for those who had their March 27th taxes still outstanding, the penalty would start to be charged on July 1st. But they've been given relief for the 90 days on the taxes, and that won't basically ever be billed to them.
Thank you, Donna. Anyone else have any questions or comments, concerns? Not seeing or hearing of any. I'm going to hand it over to Carson to do roll call.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the penalty and interest update from the Director of Finance dated July 6, 2020 for information purposes. And further, that Council approves deferring late charges June water and sewer billing until July 1st, 2020. And further, that Council confirms penalty and interest charges will be applied to the unpaid balance of interim taxes and July water billings effective July 1st, 2020. So this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Hepper,
Yes.
Councillor Van Henderson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sype, and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carson. We're going to go to 7.3.1 Recreation Community Services. I'm going to let Vicky, I believe, wants to talk to this before I ask for a mover and seconder. I believe, Vicky.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before you this evening is a report regarding the contract renewal for the recreation software system that's currently used by Recreation Community Services for the administration of programs, activities, services, facility rentals, etc. As you may recall, during the budget process, staff indicated the contract was going to be up for renewal this year and recommended an RFP be released for the software system. Although the project was approved as part of the 2020 capital budget, staff identified it as one of those projects that could be postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, basically, we did not anticipate that we would still be dealing with COVID-19 in July. So as per the terms and conditions of the contract with the software provider, we do have to provide 3 months notice if we're not going to renew, and that would mean we'd have to give notice in August. If we do not provide the notice, failing to provide it would automatically renew the agreement for a year. We also recently became aware that the current provider and one of its competitors has been purchased by a multinational corporation. That corporation has indicated, although it will honor any current agreements with that software provider, that software is being pulled from the North American market and will not be taking on any new European market. So based on this information, staff feel it's very prudent that we look at or that we release the RFP for new recreation software and see what kind of opportunities are out there for us.
Oh, thank you, Vicky. Before we go, I'm going to ask for a mover and seconder, please.
Deputy Reeve,
Yep, Deputy Reeves.
Paul.
And Paul seconds. Thank you. Questions or comments? I've got one for you, Vicky.
Okay.
So we're also working on a new site for our township, and I know with COVID, it's probably been frozen for a while too. All the companies I deal with, I go to their main site, and I can do all my business on that site. When you buy this, are we going to be able to integrate it with our new site? So if somebody just goes into North Huron, our official site, they can actually go to rec and do everything they want to do? Or are we going to end up in another case where you've got to go to one site for North Huron for this, and one site for North Huron for that, and another site for North? I know, I'll stop right there.
Okay. Well, through in response to your question, Your Worship, I'm actually quite pleased to indicate that we've been moving along quite well on the development of that new website. And in fact, the team will be have its first look at the design tomorrow, officially going through it tomorrow. So we're slightly behind schedule, but we're still looking at having that in place for by the end of the year. So COVID did put us behind just a little bit, but we're moving ahead on that very well. In terms of the recreation software and integration, what we're going to do is when you have online software such as this, what basically happens is you have to provide a link on there. The link to the online registration for recreation programs and services and things like that will be on the homepage, so it will be a very seamless process. They're just basically going to click on that link and it will take them to whichever software we end up with.
Music to me ears. Other questions or comments from council? Not hearing of any. I have movers. Carson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report prepared by the Director of Recreation and Community Services dated July 6, 2020 regarding the renewal of the contract for the supply of the recreation software system. And further, the council authorizes staff to proceed with undertaking the RFP process to obtain proposals for the replacement of the recreation software system. So this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson. Oh, it appears Councillor Van Hitterson is not in the meeting right now, so she'll be absent from the vote. Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to Public Works and Facilities. Busy night tonight, fellas, ladies and gentlemen. 7.4.1 is a wing and water supply system. Again, Sean, I would like you to speak to this before I ask for a move and a second.
Certainly, and thank you, Your Worship. So as council may or may not recall, last year, 2019, Veolia Water commenced with a program where they were pulling one pump a year throughout North Huron to do a full inspection, put it back into service and move on. The thinking is that, was that we would go through all 5 well pumps, 2 in Wingham, 3 in Blythe, over the 5 years, and then into basically a rotating inspection. So last year, well 3 was inspected. The inspection went well. No major concerns. It was put back into service. Well 4, specifically, that's the well here in Wingham, down by the PUC offices, the LCBO area. It was inspected. We budgeted $16K for the inspection. When they pulled the pump, they noted significant concern with corrosion. There was heavy corrosion on the pump casings, heavy corrosion on the column. The well casing itself was badly corroded, and the cathodic protection anode that was in place was all but gone. Obviously, when they saw that, they had to pull the well out of service immediately. We had to take, you hesitate to use the word emergency measures, but they immediately ordered necessary replacements. The operation of the well 4 was actually out of service for basically the entire month of June, and returned to service June 26th. The costs obviously far exceeded the $16K that was incorporated into the budget. I should note that 4 was inspected by Veolia 10 years ago, and at that time, the pump, the motor, the column, all of this stuff was replaced. So really, when they pulled the pump, the well system, they were not expecting this extent of corrosion. 10 years is a relatively short duty cycle for a municipal well system. So at that point, we resolved that as we had to replace everything, we were going to do it right. And we, wherever possible, we utilize stainless steel, knowing now that water is somewhat corrosive. This gives us a little bit, should significantly enhance the duty cycle. We don't want to be replacing complete well systems every 10 years. The other thing they noticed, or one of the big things they noticed when they did the inspection, was that the well casing itself was severely corroded. So that is concerning insofar as had it been allowed to continue degrading, it could have significantly compromised water quality. So very happy that this was actually identified before we got to a point where the well system itself failed. So that casing was relined again in stainless steel, and then it was sealed with new grout to below the existing casing by Lot of Water. The other thing I should point out is that Veolia used a procurement process to secure the services of Lot of Water. Although they work independently of us, they did go through an appropriate procurement process. The unit, as mentioned, was put back in service end of June. It was tested. Quality and quantity are exactly as they should be. Now for the difficult part, the total cost for this project came in at $108,719.26. So basically, in essence, we have a completely rebuilt well that we're dealing with for $108,000. $16,000 allocated for the project. But in talking to Veolia about this and how we would funding these repairs, they noted I had incorporated $75,000 into the budget for SCADA replacement for 2020. And based on fairly significant failure, they told me they had absolutely no intention of going ahead with that project for this year, which in essence freed up those funds as opposed to just rolling them back into reserve. Recommendation would be that we take the $16K that we budgeted, obviously, the $75K that was allocated for the SCADA upgrade could be applied to this job, which would then bring us to approximately $17,800 being required drawn out of reserve. And just for the purpose of council's background on this, right now we're sitting at $2,834,215 in the water long-term reserve. Sounds like a lot of money, but we've got a lot of projects coming up as well. Now, future considerations discussion. I really wanted to underscore that this is not what I would consider to be a bad news story. What this does is it underscores the value of a well-developed maintenance program. Yes, it was a lot of money, but it was unanticipated insofar as that well degraded very quickly because of the nature of the water. So again, this underscores the value of this maintenance program. The problem was caught before it became became any kind of a health concern whatsoever. So moving forward, so as I said, we've done well 3, well 4 has been done. I would recommend that we just, once bitten, twice shy, I would recommend that we accelerate this inspection process a little bit. And as we move into 2021, it was going to be recommended that we do one of the 3 wells in Blythe. We're in talking with Veolia, they're looking at perhaps suggesting for 2021 that it be budgeted to do both well 1 and well number 2 in 1 year, one in the spring, one in the fall. So then by 2022, you're doing well 5, which as council's aware is the newest well. At that point, over the course of 3-4 years, you will have gone through the entire well system. And if deemed prudent, you could start into another 5-year cycle and inspect. You know, once you see that everything's good, you could perhaps look at stretching this out, but this would put us really on a very even keel in terms of inspection. So if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them.
Just before we get questions, I'm just going to ask for a mover and a seconder, please.
Paul.
Paul moves.
Anita will move.
Okay, and Anita seconds. We have a mover and seconder. I'm going to start with Paul, and then I'm going to go to Kevin. Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, through you, Reeve. Sean, so you feel every 5 years we get each well checked is appropriate then, I take it, right? That's often enough?
Through you, your worship. Yes, Veolia had talked about maybe having a longer inspection, but based on what we just saw in the short cycle that we saw well 4 go through, my recommendation would be that we do a couple of 5-year cycles. And at that point, if you start looking at it and you say, you know what, we keep pulling these wells once every 5 years, they're in great shape, then maybe you can stretch it out. But just until such time as you've developed the confidence in the program, for comparatively little, $16,000 to $20,000 for a well inspection is pretty cheap for peace of mind.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, through you, Sean. The corrosion on the pump to be that serious would have to amend an early departure of the sacrificial anode, as you say, was missing. Would just a more robust checking of that anode would be sufficient? 'Cause it would have to go first.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, there was some of the anode was still there, but it was close to depleted. In talking to Veolia, their lead hand, Don, who was a North Huron employee, he knows that well system well, and historically that particular water source has been a little more aggressive.
Have they been showing a rise in like the alkali levels or organic rust or something that would cause the this corrosion to accelerate? Have they been noticing anything in the samples?
Now, he hasn't specifically taught. Usually if they see an issue, they bring it to my attention, and there was no reference to that. I can't say with any confidence, but that's certainly not something that they've flagged in discussion.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Go ahead, Chris.
Through you, Reeve. Sean, is there I'll call it a deeper version of that inspection? Because if you're thinking 1 and 2, and they're both getting close, like that's an expensive fix. You know, I still want our water to be safe, of course, but you know, can just we're looking for rust, are we not? Rusted pipe, or is it more than that?
It's through you, Your Worship. It's far more detailed than that. They physically remove the entire well pump and column, inspect that, and it's more than rust. They're looking for corrosion, for pitting, for degradation of that pipe. Then they scour the actual well and inspect that casing that protects the structure down to bedrock. So it's a fairly in-depth inspection. It's not just a matter of running a camera down or anything like that.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, may I ask something, Reeve?
You sure can. Go ahead, Nita.
Sean, are all these wells at the same depth, and how deep are they?
I was afraid somebody would ask me about depth. I haven't got those specs, to be honest, Councillor Van Hitterson, but I don't expect that they're all the same depth at all. Typically, you know, they'll target a specific aquifer. And they're all in different, exceptional 1 and 2.
The water could be, sorry.
Yeah.
The quality of the water could be different for well 1 and 2, so the expected lifetime could be different.
Very much so. And 1 and 2 are very old wells.
Yeah.
They're well established.
Yeah, okay. Where's well number 4 located?
Through you, Your Worship, well 4 is the one that's very close in proximity to, well, it's actually behind the property that you approved the site plan and drainage for the new Ideal Supply. Right in behind there by the LCBO.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments or concerns? Sean, I'm just going to... Yeah, go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, I think it's a good news story about the efficient, or the, you know, making sure that we do the proper protocols in place in order to successfully understand where our water system has some risks and where it does not. And my opinion is I would rather spend $108,000 to ensure that we have good water than $16,000 every 5 years to find out we have a problem with it 5 years from now. So at the end of the day, you know, my point is that if we need to get on the cycle of every 5 years, this is an idea of this. These are the type of things that we need to budget for, so that we know as councillors that these aren't the things that, you know, these aren't the things that you get praised for. These are the things that will keep you up at night if you don't maintain them. And that's the part that I, you know, as a concern from, you know, if we can find an idea why things are doing what they're doing, in sense of why is 10 years not enough, or why is 10 years too long, and I definitely, in my mind, would have a lot better sleep at night knowing that I'm not going to wake up and find that, you know, well, it's not working the way it should be, and we've got different issues or different concerns and testing and all that stuff So I'm happy with the service we got from Veolia. I'm very happy for the discussion and the information that they're giving to us, as well as they're giving us information about, yeah, here, that SCADA project now, we're not gonna probably look at it. There's bigger fish to fry right now. And you know, they're helping. It sounds to me like a communication that's back and forth between our senior management and that service. And I think that's something we want to continue to have.
Thanks, Trevor. Anyone else? Just want to touch on this for a second. Two things. Number one, this I'm going to think this plan that you're putting together, Sean, will be in the asset management plan, because this will be part of maintenance on asset management that we're all trying to strive towards. Although we've been living a very busy life lately, I think that's a good thing, because then these things don't come up, and then you don't have to spend $200,000 on a minute's notice, because you can see them accumulate if your asset management plan is in place. Second question I'd like to ask, or the comment I'd like to make, is you said that this money that we had is coming from reserves. Just so that I'm clear and we're clear, reserves you're talking about are actually the water reserves, nothing to do with taxation on the township. And the water reserves are basically, I believe it's $20 a time we all pay on the end of our bill, and Donna can maybe speak to that if she likes, that pays for this. And the fact that we have $3 million sitting in reserves, but we just ate up 100,000 here. I'm not sure how much we ate up on Carling Terrace, but we're looking at a 2.7 or $3 million standpipe that has to go in the Wingham ward shortly. That's almost a forced issue at this point. So to those that think we've got a lot of money sitting around, it's not a lot of money when you've got to pay $3 million for a standpipe. So if you just wouldn't mind touching on where that funding comes from. I believe Blythe and Wingham wards, because they're users of it, are paying for that. And I'm not, do you want to touch that, Sean, or just Donna?
Well, certainly, Your Worship, actually, I think that definitely sounds like a Donna style question to me.
Yes. Thank you, Reeve Bailey. So, yes, as you know, we have been collecting on the water bills since 2009, and we have put that money away in long-term reserves. And as you say, and I'd like to reiterate, it does sound like we've accumulated a nice sum, but it's just the tip of the iceberg when you've listed all the projects that we have to undertake. So as Sean was saying in his report, actually the amount that will be coming out of reserves is the $17,720 instead of the whole $108,000, because his intention and recommendation is that the SCADA project for $75,000 is not going ahead now. So then, and that money was in the budget, so that $75,000 is being reallocated. There was $16,000 in the budget, so that's being used. And so then the only amount we need to pull out of our long-term reserve is the $17,720. So for now, we're not taking a very big hit on that reserve, thankfully, because of the reallocation of the SCADA project.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, there's no further questions. I believe I have a mover and a seconder, so I'm going to hand it over to Sir Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receive the report of the Director of Public Works dated July 6, 2020 regarding repairs to the Wingham Water Supply System well number 4 for information. And further, that Council authorize $17,720 to be drawn from the Water Reserve Fund to offset the repair. And further, that Council authorizes the Director of Finance to make the necessary changes to the 2020 budget. So this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Seg?
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you very kindly. We're going to move on now to 7.4.2, and this is in Bridge and Dam Committee final report. And Sean, you're up again.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'll try to, there's a lot of material that's in front of council tonight, and I'll try to get through it in a timely fashion, so they're timing this with a sundial. So I'll go through the summary and some of the discussion points, and then I'd like to, if it pleases Reeve and council, sort of specifically speak to the recommendations that are before council. So moving into the so as everyone's aware, the Housing, Bridge and Dam Committee was commissioned by council. They met for the first time in June of 2019, so it's been a little over a year since the initial meeting. The mandate of the committee was to review all information necessary, consider all facets of the Housing, Bridge and Dam, and to make recommendations on the future of the asset to council. The committee met a total of 9 times and had quite a bit of momentum leading up to the emergency declaration and the ceasing of all meetings. So they met from June 2019 to February 2020. And at that point, the last meeting, they passed resolution Housing, Bridge and Dam 06-2020. And that resolution was the key to this entire report. It read that the Housing, Bridge and Dam Committee hereby agree to endorse and recommend the option of rehabilitation to be incorporated as the preferred course of action to the final report to council. And further, that council determine a timeline for the rehabilitation to be completed. And further, that if that timeline was not achieved, the asset was to be removed. And that was carried. If anybody is interested in seeing not only that particular meeting, but some of the meetings that minutes leading up to that decision, that key decision, they can all be found at the North Huron website. You just go to the council drop-down menu, look for agendas and minutes, and pull any of the housing ones out of there for members of the public or council that might be interested. So getting into the discussion component here, we talked in the report about the committee's responsibility and scope. The committee was established with the primary purpose of providing advice and recommendations regarding the future of the Housing, Bridge and Dam. Of course, all decision-making authority regarding the asset resides with you, the council of the Township of North Huron. In the absence of, and this is an important point that a couple of committee members wanted stressed, in the absence of any definitive costing for the various options, the focus of the committee remained primarily on the technical and social merits of each option, as opposed to any focus on financial aspects for the project. And that decision was discussed at length at the committee level before they actually agreed to really focus again on the technical and the social merits. The committee used a very specific and structured process to complete their mandate. Basically, first off, they developed a work plan. Then the lion's share of the time that the committee met was spent in familiarization with the asset. This included personal review on the part of all the committee members of all documentation and studies that are available. And we posted them on the website, so they are available to the general public as well. They then got into a number of meetings where they met with delegates who had experience that was specific to the Housing Dam. Okay, so they met with Andy Ross from BM Ross, and they also met with Peter, who had a long-standing experience with the dam. From that point, they moved on to meeting with technical experts, so people that actually didn't focus on the Housing Dam, but dams in areas specific to dams in general. They met with Sid Vanderveen, who brought them up to speed on the Drainage Act and gave much consideration and food for thought to the committee as to how they would consider anything they did with the housing insofar as it may or may not impact drainage. They brought KGS representatives in and listened to an in-depth report, at which time KGS talked about the geotechnical aspects, stability assessment, and the safety report that was done on our asset. And then they spoke with a an engineer by the name of Bill Trick, who has experience in water power generation systems, because they really want to kind of understand how they may consider this asset in the future. After that, they really focused on stakeholder engagement. So they met with representatives from local interest and citizen groups. And then they also had put a call out and reviewed letters. It wasn't done during the minutes. It wasn't done during the meeting, but all of the members of the committee reviewed a number of letters from residents and users of the House Bridge Dam. So they solicited input in written form as well to consider. And then at that point, we got into, or they got into some of the really interesting stages of the whole process, where they began to debate surrounding the pros and the cons associated with each of the options they looked at. And ultimately that ended up with the recommendation that was forwarded to council. It's important to note that they focused on 4 specific options. Option number 1 being do nothing. It seems outlandish, but it always has to be considered. So they in exercising due diligence, they looked at that option. They looked at full removal of the asset and naturalization of the waterway. They looked at rehabilitation of the existing structure in one form or another, whether that was a bridge and dam or just a dam. They considered rehabilitation of something that's there. And then they also looked at the full and more aggressive approach of removing the existing structure in its entirety and replacing that with a structure. So at that point, and at this point, we were getting into the later stages, and there were a couple of very significant resolutions that led up to the resolution that was sent forward. At the December 18th meeting, the following resolution was passed, and that was Resolution 3919. Housing, Bridge and Dam Committee hereby agree to remove the do nothing option as an outcome and not to include it in a recommendation to council. And this was done because the committee identified and recognized the fact that doing nothing was going to significantly increase risk and liability to the township of North Huron. So it just wasn't viable to continue to look the other way and ignore the asset. Now, one of the key individuals that the committee heard from was Peter White, who is an engineer with extensive experience in the rehabilitation of heavy concrete structures. This individual outlined an approach to rehab that could be applied to the asset to restore integrity and bring it and start to bring it into compliance with modern standards. And one of the things I mentioned modern standards because it was identified through this process that this dam does not meet what would be considered to be a modern standard. So if you were going to build a dam today, you could not say we want one of those and point at the Housing Bridge and Dam. It doesn't have the mass, it doesn't have the width, it doesn't have the structure or stability that would be permitted through LIRA, the Lakes Improvement Act. And then following that discussion, they passed one more key resolution, and that was that the Housing Bridge and Dam Committee hereby agreed to eliminate the removal and replacement option as a recommended outcome, and further that this option will not be endorsed by the committee in the final report. So one of the methods that the committee used was to hear everything, to consider everything, to debate everything, and then to start eliminating the low-lying fruit, the options that they did not feel were in the best interest based on what they had heard. So then as an outcome, think of all these resolutions led to the resolution that was put in front of tonight and is being considered by council tonight. This resolution was voted on with 4-2 in favor. The chair did not vote and one member abstained. One additional member was absent at the time of, and as council will recall, was on a leave of absence. So council can now consider the resolution as it's presented and support it, or alternative has the full authority to make any or go in any differing direction with regard to the future of the asset. So now let's talk about future considerations for a moment. In the event the resolution as presented is adopted by council, a staff report, I really would like to point out that adopting that resolution is a monumental step, but it's a step. It's not, you don't put your hand up, pass this resolution tonight. Good work, everybody, we're done. I think it's the first step towards a long and perhaps arduous journey. And the recommendation, we'll talk about this shortly, is that a staff report outlining the best course of action associated with the next steps will indeed be required. Council should be aware that it is fully expected that engineering services will be required to determine an appropriate project scope in order to develop an estimate for the purpose of fundraising. Council had stated and has long stated that if this project is to move forward, it is going to be funded through fundraising as opposed to through taxation. So that's where the importance of this report comes. This next report, insofar as you need to know exactly what you're fundraising for. You need to know what that project looks like. As I stated, the committee really kind of moved back and forth between, do we need a bridge? Do we just want a dam? Do we want both? So council would need to decide on what that rehabilitation project actually looks like and what the cost is. You know, to send to start on a path of fundraising without having any idea what the target is, I think could be detrimental and horrifically problematic down the road. You know, you could accidentally overshoot your target. You could, I think, worse yet, or probably worse to overshoot than undershoot, because then you got to deal with this surplus collected. So there's a lot of complexity. All that to circle back and say, if you bring in an engineering firm to develop the project, to give a really solid, tight construction costing on the project, and to make sure council knows what life cycle costs moving forward for this asset look like, then you'd be in a position to start considering how what that critical step after that is. So if I may then think what I would do is just quickly walk through the recommendations so you know what the thinking of staff was here. So obviously the first recommendation is you would receive the report that we're discussing right now. And further, that the Council of the Township of North Huron support the resolution of Resolution 06-2020 of the House and Bridge and Dam Committee, which we discussed earlier. And that was that rehab was a preferred course of action, that Council establish a timeline for the rehab and fundraising to take place, and that if that timeline wasn't achieved, that the asset would be removed to prevent, and I'm paraphrasing here, to avoid further liability. So that's, you know, you basically, if you chose to do that, you would be supporting that resolution. Further, that staff be directed to secure quotes to retain the services of a qualified engineering firm to develop that project scope, to develop the price estimates for the rehabilitation of the asset, and to include life cycle costs. Further, that staff be directed to bring forward that report, or a report on the recommended next steps, which would include the price quotes from the engineering firm, which would give council much better idea, A, what the project looked like, B, what the timeline is for the, you know, that you might consider to be appropriate for fundraising, and then to allow you to determine what that fundraising, how that's done. Is it done through a committee? Is it done through, there's any number of options. So that report is critical in that it would lay all of that out for staff. And then further, that the House and Bridge and Dam Committee, having fulfilled its mandate, be disbanded and all the members thanked for their service and contribution to the Township of North Huron. So that's, at this point, Your Worship, that's all I have.
Thank you, Sean. I'm going to get, I'd like Kevin to speak to this too. I wonder if we should, because Kevin was the chairman of the committee. So I'd like Kevin to speak about his 2 years, I believe, or year you've been on this, Kevin, and just update us. Then I'm going to ask for a move in a second.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. I want to thank Sean for elegantly putting all the critical points out in point form there. He touched base on pretty much everything that we went through as a committee. You have to remember, it was set out to be right from the start. It was going to be, a spirited discussion because it's it's a very a passionate subject in the township for being there for as long as it has been. First off, I'd also like to put a thank you to Miss Nesbitt that she was quite capable of putting our incoherent thoughts onto paper as to that we could actually read them back and not start an argument again. It was right from the start. We brought everybody together with different angles of what they thought the way forward was, and it soon became with all the information that was coming forward that, as you said quickly, the do nothing was out of the question. We found out exactly how old the structure was, as far as re-looking at the original drawings for the dam, and then went on to looking more at the social things about who used it and how it could go forward. I believe we came to I guess you would say the only logical answer from all of those different reports. I know it neither side of the argument got anywhere near what they anticipated, what we direction we were going to go in the start. But that was the purpose of the outcome, to come to some kind of a conclusion, and I'm happy with the conclusion that we brought forward. It at least gives a point to move forward from, now that we know that tearing it all down and putting a brand new one up there, it's just not financially or time-wise feasible to do that. It would take probably a 15-year period to take all that stuff out and then fundraise and get a new one built. But the decision to refurbish was the only step forward for the committee, other than just saying remove the asset, and they felt that it was worth it for something that's 115 years, 120 years old, to not let it die a quick or a slow and painful death. As to if we could refurbish it to a point that would be the most cost effective out of all the issues that we had there, but not knowing how much that would cost, as Sean pointed out, as we weren't taking into consideration the costs of it, other than the chances of being able to fundraise for something to completely remove and completely rebuild a new one would be, I think that would be out of the reach of any municipality 5 times our size to do that. But to look forward to, if there was a way of refurbishing it to bring it up to today's standards, that would be the recommendation of the committee. Going forward, that would mean more committees as we get reports back. If we did get a firm allocation of what the scope of refurbishing it might look like, that would lead council to be able to make a better decision as to whether to even attempt to refurbish or remove it. I don't think that myself going through all the information, other than a financial outcome, to make the decision whether refurbishing is feasible. That report would have to come back as to cost and scope by an engineer that has far more knowledge in that kind of thing than ourselves. But as a committee, that was the recommendation that we bring forward to council for their consideration. I think it was a well thought out, definitely well debated resolution that I think we can finally put an answer to the question of what do we do with this asset. If there's any questions from anybody, I could take them as far as the process.
Thank you very much for that, Kevin. Thank you very much for that, Sean. Okay, so I'm going to ask for a mover or a seconder, then we'll go into questions, comments, and concerns. Do I have a mover?
Move for discussion, Deputy Reeve.
Okay, and I have Rick McBurney seconding. Okay, so discussion.
Rebuild.
Go ahead, Trevor.
Either Sean or Kevin, as part of the committee, I never heard anything from any of the meetings that I looked on. Was there any discussion from the committee as to what they believe is an acceptable timeline as to the fundraising goal? Because again, at the end of the day, what I'm hearing is the recommendation is to refurbish, assuming that the fundraising can happen. But if it can't happen, then to remove. But the caveat is there is under a reasonable amount of time. So was there any discussion at the committee level about what that is considered to be a reasonable amount of time?
Well, that was the consideration that we were going under, was the scope of the project. If we found out what the refurbishing was, as far as the timeline is or if that's even possible. We don't even know at this point, if that's totally possible, whether we got people to come in and say refurbish is completely out of the question. The structure is too far gone. But if it is, that timeline would also be on, they said, would be, the engineer would have to say, this repair needs to be done in, within the next 4 or 5 years, and or else it's not going to be possible. There's a timeline as to when the asset becomes non-savable. I think that was the only timeline, was just a reasonable timeline for the development of an engineer's plan going forward, and as to the scope and length of the project. I don't think there was any intention to drag this out for, we need 20 years to raise funds. I think it just came on to the ability of the structure to be able to be fixed in what a timeline it needed to be done.
John, did you want to?
No, Your Worship. I think that captures it. This next report that's being recommended is all critical. For all the reasons that Councillor Faulkner just mentioned. Is this a viable approach? What is construction estimate associated? I think then you as council and as longtime residents understand what the capacity for the community is for fundraising. So once you have a construction estimate in front of you, you can look at it and say, well, we fundraised for the West Cass Community Center. We fundraised for the hospital. I think at that point, it'll start bringing things into perspective, and it'll make it easier for you to make that determination. But that next report through the engineers is all critical.
Thank you, Sean. Other questions? Go ahead, Chris.
Got through you, Reeve, it's comments, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Please hear me out. It's upsetting to me knowing that we've seen reports that say the dam is, well, for a lack of a better word, kaput. And, is it fixable? Holy smokes, do you fix an old car to a really old car that's rusted right out? Like, there's a point. And, how far is the stomach to take that point along? To spend $93,000 on an engineer to do some of the things that you mentioned, that's a lot of money. And it could be used for the removal, as part of the removal costs. And all we need to do is get an RFP, which doesn't cost anything, and find out what it will cost, you know, or who could do it and how much it would cost. Like I'm leaning that way. You're already seeing that. It's a bother, the vote. When I came to see how the vote was, like to have a person abstain, like that blew my mind. Like, just can I, all right, before I get my mouth into it, Kevin, what?
No, it was myself that abstained because I felt that the committee had the ability to come to a conclusion themselves. I get to vote on this as council, and I didn't want my vote, double vote going on in the situation. I kind of left it to the committee because they were equal sided to try to come up with a consensus. That's the only reason why there was an abstaining vote. That was myself. I did that for that reason, that I get to vote on it in council in my own way, without having to say that I pushed the program, as council wished in that process. Just for being kind of a two-headed sword there. So it was myself that didn't.
Okay, thank you for that, then. So the other thing that's really got me is money. Like, this is going to cost. I know there's a wish to fundraise and stuff, but people complain about the cost of taxes, and are they going to be laying out thousands of dollars in donations? I don't know, but to me, we have a water tank to build, and we know it's going to be a few million. So what's more important? A water tank that takes water, that stores water to drink, or do you want something that stores water to float a boat on? I know there's more to it than that.
Chris, I think
disturbing.
Chris,
what we do not have the money. I don't care how much it's supposed to cost. It's going to be hard enough even to remove the thing, which I understand will have to happen at some point in time.
Chris, hold it.
How I feel, Reeve.
Yeah, no, I understand how you feel, but you're getting confused with fundraising, whether it be for the hospital or the dam or the theater. It's not tax money at this point. We've made that very clear. I've been very clear about that. You're talking about two different things. This is fundraising. We're not talking about the fundraising right now. If you tear it down, then we're talking about using our tax dollars. So I'd like Sean just to speak that. He did have his hand up. You're into two different things there.
Yes, thank you. If I may, Your Worship. And I think just speaking to Councillor Palmer's comment, the mandate of the committee was to wade waist deep through decades of information and to listen to scores of people's commentary to come forward with a direction, with a recommendation just on what course of action to take. Leading up to that, none of the options there'd been no direction taken on any of the options, the do nothing, the rehabilitate, and so on and so forth. And that's why I keep coming back to the importance of the next, of the body of the recommendations that are before council, because you are by no means as council being removed from full control. The fact that in adopting in supporting the resolution of the Bridge and Dam Committee, that puts other steps in play. You may get quotes back. We're not spending any money. We're getting quotes for the engineering services. They may come back at 80,000. They may come back at 300,000. We just don't know. That comes in front of council again, which I'm expecting will generate potential spirited debate. But the recommendations in front of council are structured specifically so that you can, now that you have a direction that a committee of council has pointed you in, if you so choose, you can work in that direction with many stops along the way. There's opportunity to consider the process as you go. Does that help in any way?
Can I defend one point?
As long as we stay on the pattern we're on, that's all I'm asking.
Yeah, when I referred to taxes, that was general taxation. It had nothing to do with adding more to this venture. It's just, you know, everyone's concerned about their taxes, period. Okay, general. So that's what I was referring to. I'm just afraid if you let this one go, then you're letting the horse out of the barn, and it's really hard to get it back. I know there's steps along the way, but holy smokes. I was told by my constituents, don't you go near this thing. And there you go. That was something when I was at campaigning. One person out of about 100 wanted it. The rest did not. Fervently did not.
You know what's ironic? No, we'll talk later.
Reed Bailey,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think we have to be clear is this council mandated them to do something. We asked them for a response because the previous council ran into it that individuals within the municipality, 2 and 4, you know, thought it was bogged down in the political aspect of what that asset means to the municipality. So this council took a different approach and said, you as a committee, you go through don't worry about the finance part of it because you don't know what that looks like at this point. Weed through the weeds of all the political, the not political, the social, all that stuff, and you come back to us that says, what do you think? At the end of the day, all of that being said, we're taking a recommendation from a committee that we asked for. If we aren't, I just want to stress that if we are going to not accept a recommendation for whatever reason from a committee, I would like to strongly advise that you probably will never have another individual sit on a committee, because they're going to look at the council, any council from here on out, as saying, why would I bother my time? Because they didn't get paid an ounce for it, because you're not going to listen to me anyways. And the social aspect of this is a hot button topic. It's been a hot button topic for 10 years, 15 years, or 25 years if you talk to the Carters. So at the end of the day, I'm happy with the recommendation that they've came. They came to a decision. Now we need to move forward, and that's again what the steps are Sean's taking their place. My concern has always been about, I don't want this to land on another council's door. And that's when I talk about this, when I commented about how long or what the perceived notion is, I just want to make sure that when this council makes a decision, that it's a decision that's going to go, and if the next council wants to reverse it, they're going to have to deal that on their own deal. Like, we have to move this forward, because if we don't, I think committees of council and ratepayers and people who want to show support of this council and this town are going to die, because they're going to believe they're not being heard no matter what they do. So just take into consideration that, and that's my comment.
Thank you, Trevor. Anybody else?
Yeah, may I say something?
You may. Go ahead, dear.
Yeah, we are talking about taxpayers' money, but there is still a lot of taxpayers' money involved in this dam, because our director of public works is tax paid, the secretary is tax paid, all the engineer studies are being paid from taxes. That is not all coming from a certain fundraising thing. So that there is no tax money involved is not really true.
Thank you. Anyone else? Paul first, then to Chris.
Yes, yeah, I saw the odd meeting there, and I just noticed the one when the KGS people were talking, Mr. Fuad Curry and Yong Bo Fu, and I remember the question that they said. They said, this cannot be fixed. Like, and they're engineers, and I guess I have to wonder, what is really best? Are we to be listening to this, or do we have to go get another engineer for another story? Like, what should be done? And these guys have done a pile of dams. They said the number there, how many dams, like, and one was the lead structural engineer. Like, I just wondered, did that fall on deaf ears, or I don't know, maybe that engineer was wrong. That's my comment with listening to some of the meeting there.
Thank you, Paul. I believe Kevin's going to respond to that.
Yeah, through you, yeah, Paul. There was also a number of other individuals that were called upon for their expertise. That, as you say, all sides were bringing their
right
own swing on things to sway the conversation one way or the other. And there was some information on refurbishing that was brought forward, and was never really fully looked at as far as an engineering from the engineering standpoint. The concept was brought forward, and I think what this last report, if we actually look for an engineering report on the refurbishing, there was never one issued for the refurbishing. There was ideas of how it could be done and other experts brought in, but we never had a really final as far as it costing, what the refurbishing would cost. Looking at some of the other ones were for like removing and rebuilding, the cost was just way more than London, Ontario wouldn't build it with their tax base, but not the refurbishing. So it was just the one open option that we could look at as being a way forward. If the refurbishing comes out that it can't be done, or it can be, or it's going to be astronomical, then it's the removal option. It's just it was just the decision of how to go forward. They didn't want to go forward without completely looking at the refurbishing and getting a definitive answer on it. They knew what the definitive answer was on building a new one, so that was out. So this is the kind of the only way forward with other than removal. And that's what they brought towards council.
Yeah, through you, Reeve. I'd like to.
Yes,
with that, Kevin. But that day, somebody asked them if they do the refurbishing it, like blowing out and whatnot, and he said it's way beyond that. Like, I'm just getting a confusing story here. Like, and it came out pretty clear that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the way the committee heard the results from the experts, and your vote would have been one way, and somebody else's might have been another. So I can't defend the voting, but yeah, I do understand your revelations on some of the engineering, but there was so many different aspects that were brought forward to, it's just whichever one you want to hang your hat on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chris, did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, Deputy Reeves, through you, Reeve. Deputy Reeves, I'm feeling strong-armed by you from what you said, and we are not here for that. We have our own opinions. We vote as...
Chris, I'm going to stop you right there because, we're not going to get into a personal discussion here.
That's where it ends.
You got to say what you wanted to say. He got to say what he wanted to say. We're done there, okay? Thank you.
Too bad.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else? Not hearing any. I'm going to hand it over to Carson. Carson, it's all yours. Oh, do I have? Yeah, I have movers.
Through your worship, yeah, you have a mover and a seconder. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the Director of Public Works dated July 6, 2020 regarding the recommendation of the House and Bridge and Dam Committee for information. And further, that the Council of the Township of North Huron support resolution HBD 06-2020 of the House and Bridge and Dam Committee. And further, that staff be directed to secure quotes to retain the service of a qualified engineering firm to develop a project scope and price estimate for the rehabilitation of the asset, including life costs. And further, that staff be directed to bring forward a report on recommended next steps, including cost estimates necessary to develop the timeline for fundraising for rehabilitation of the House and Bridge and Dam. And further, that the House and Bridge and Dam Committee, having fulfilled its mandate, be disbanded and all members thanked for their service and contribution to the Township of North Huron. So this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor Van Hittersum,
No.
Councillor Palmer,
No.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight, Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
No.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 4-3, with the noes being Councillor Heffer, Councillor Van Hittersum, and Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to take opportunity right now to thank the volunteers that did step forward for this committee, as we have many committees, and we're going to have a few more shortly. We do appreciate your help and all the effort that Kevin himself put in. I know this was a very stressful one, and Sean for your patience. Really to thank everyone. So let's move forward. 7.4.2 is done. 7.5, there's no fire department report.
Has left the meeting.
Building department, there is no report. Children's department, we have 7.1 child care reopening. I think Val will probably want to talk to this again before I ask for movers. Valerie,
Thank you, Bailey. Yep. We put forward a report for council. We felt it was important to touch base with all of council. I thank Reeve Bailey and Deputy Councillor Sight for their input as we've been having continuous meetings to look at options. And we were finally at a point that we could bring forward information for all of council to reflect on and make a decision on. So we were closed by the emergency order on March 13th. They did give us permission or revoke that order on June 11th, 2020. So the province announced on the Wednesday that the centers that were closed by provincial order could reopen as early as the Friday, June 13th, 2020. So the information and guidance materials about reopening has been very slow to follow. They announced this reopening without having consulted or provided us with any information to reflect about their reopening strategy. Sorry for that. Sorry. The province also announced that we were prohibited from adjusting parent fees upon reopening, that we could not make adjustments until at least after September. So whatever parent fees we were charging have to remain in place until September. The funding details have yet to be provided. So I can only provide you financial information based on guessing and estimates based on what funding has flowed previously, and with the thought that funding will continue to flow. During our closure time, we did continue to receive flows of funds from the county and the province. These funds were for some subsidized spaces that we typically would have had, and also for what we call our general operating grant. So general operating grant is basically a subsidy provided for how many spaces you operate within your facilities. They have not been able to tell us whether or not they will provide additional funding. The biggest issue that we're facing as we move forward is the reduction in the number of people that can be allowed in our buildings. They have mandated that we have cohorts of 10, which must include any lunch break staff and any staff operating in the rooms as well. So that significantly decreases the number of children you can offer childcare for. And it also becomes very costly because we must maintain those rooms from the time we open until the time we close instead of doing a flexi schedule, which we normally do, to allow more staggered entry of children into our programs. So you're going to be paying for staff to attend to children from 6:30 in the morning till 5:30 at night, and they must remain in those rooms that they've been assigned to for that day. They go in weeks about. So if we did part-time children, you wouldn't be able to fill their spaces on their alternate days off because we have to maintain that group for that full week. So second here. So my staff are eager to continue to go back to work and to look at the best way and approach to do this. We do have our policies and procedures attached to this document that will allow us to follow all the recommendations from public health and from our ministry. It will involve a lot of additional cleaning, and it will also involve screening of families and children as they enter into our programs. To update you, Godrich has reopened at this time, I believe. They were on a path to open as an emergency center, so they had some strategically plans in place to get going quickly. Clinton and Seaforth are considering opening and are moving towards that as well. Just reading through, so we're not allowed to have parents or visitors in our programs, so the parents will be dropping their children at the door. We are limited in our choice of equipment and materials that we'll be putting out in the center, so it will be a different teaching style than we formerly have had. We do have to offer each parent a space based on our priority list, which we've also included in this document. We have to hold their spaces for 30 days before they before they can be taken off of our wait list. We do have to provide training for all staff on personal protective equipment, screening, and sanitizing. We must provide an attestation to our Ministry of Education at minimum 48 hours before we proceed. A big factor for you to consider is our building capacity at the main center will be 30 children at maximum. Previously, we were at 67, so you're less than half capacity based on how they're going to run their cohorts of 10. We will require additional staff, as mentioned before. And just as another point, we are not aware at this time on how the schools will be reopening, so we're not certain if we will be allowed to run before and after school programs in September, what those numbers will look like. And the reason I bring that to your attention is because for July and August, we do not have before and after school, which typically offsets our costs for operating the main center. Because before and after school, you have such large numbers and are able to do it with less staff. That's how we usually offset your main center costs. We also have a priority list that we'd like to present to you. The priority list is for frontline workers as defined by the province. The second priority would be childcare needs for North Huron residences who are working full-time. A third priority, childcare needs for non-North Huron residents who are also working full-time. And a fourth priority, childcare needs for North Huron residents who are working part-time. Fifth priority, childcare needs for North Huron residents who are working part-time on a first-come, first-served basis. I did attach a financial impact for you. I'm just going to grab my numbers here. I presented 3 options just to see if there's any cost savings or any way to show efficiencies in having fewer numbers or different groupings. You can reduce your costs as far as what a deficit would look like in a monthly basis. However, you would be serving many less children. And actually the costs per day when communicating with the county, if we went to half capacity, which is having 30 in our building instead of 67, the cost per child per day in actually implementing the program would be 96. If you went to a total of 26, it would be 99 per day. And if you went down to only 16 children in your building, it would be a 109 a day. So it would save in deficit cost, but it wouldn't be servicing very many children if you went that way. So we can talk about that as we go further. Both the CAO and myself have reached out to the county level, who is our contact for funding for childcare services. And they definitely understand that it's a very costly endeavor to reopen at this time, and that we haven't got all the pieces to share with you. However, they're very supportive, and they definitely have received some strategies on funding and some tools, but they haven't been able to share them. So Wednesday is when I have a meeting with the county, and I would have more information for you after that. So I guess in general, what we're asking or wanted to bring forward to you as a council is that we do recommend reopening our child care center under the new operational guidelines that have been presented, that we do provide services based on a priority list, and that we then monitor, evaluate, and report back to you as we continue. It's a lot of information, and I know that the details of how we operate sound confusing, but it can be done. And it's important, I think, to remember that we want to support our working families as they go back into recovery mode and try to get back to work as well. I know that my own staff, there is some concerns about health, but mainly staff are eager to try and figure out the new way of doing business, because we don't anticipate it's going to change in the short term. So Reeve Bailey, I can throw it back to you, and you can decide how best to move forward now.
Thank you very much, Val. And I do agree with you, although I'll take it a step further. I don't think we're going to be back to normal for a long time. I just, unfortunately, we're going to start adjusting now, because we have to start adjusting our lifestyle, and we have to start reopening. Having said that, can I get a mover for Val, for CC 2020-505 childcare reopening? Do I have a mover?
Anita will move.
Anita moves, Paul seconds. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to throw it out for questions, comments, or concerns about the situation. Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, through you, Reeve. For Val, you had half capacity at 96, 26 at 99. I'm sorry, I missed the next number that you said there.
Okay, so the last one for 16 children would be 109 per day.
Thank you very much, Val.
No problem.
Any other questions, concerns?
Reeve Bailey.
Go ahead, Trevor.
My question is more to do with the priority listing. And my question is not necessarily the difference between North Huron residents and non-North Huron residents, but how do we get away with asking somebody if they're a full-time employee or a part-time employee without discrimination? So that is my biggest concern. We don't want to find ourselves in front of human rights tribunals because we're asking people to provide personal information that isn't, in essence, wouldn't have been required any other time. But all because of this, we're now asking for it. So my concern is this potentially a discrimination issue if we have to start asking for this stuff for order priority sequence?
So I'm gonna ask Val, and if Val's not sure if we have any senior staff that can help us out. Okay, go ahead, Val.
I would comment, Councillor Sipe, that we usually do ask our families this, and we do have a priority or wait list policy in place prior to COVID-19. How we usually determine if a family needs full-time care is based on their hours they're booking their children into our program. So we're not necessarily saying, well, what hours are you working? But we do already preferentially place full-time children versus part-time children, because of course it's more cost effective to fill our spaces with full-time children versus part-time. Our part-time families in the past have always been informed that should we ever require a full-time space, that they would then be provided notice and we would have to accept full-time if necessary. So it's something that our families understand. It's a jockeying of positions within a childcare system. And mostly families understand that there is priority given and preferential treatment given to those families with full-time, and then say those with siblings who are also in care. That's typically how it's been done in the past as well.
So so the question about priority isn't when it says in excess of 20 hours per week. That's based on the child, not the parent, correct?
Correct.
Because that's not how that reads. So that's the concern I had, is if we're asking a working family that if we're considering full time more than 20 hours a week, we're actually considering it's 20 hours of care that they need per week. So I think I read it as who are working full time. It really should be childcare needs for North Huron residents who are in need of daycare services for more than 20 hours a week.
Okay, we can modify the wording to.
Well, I just want to make sure that when we send it out to people, that they're not going to get their backup that says, well, you didn't ask me if I was working 20 hours a week before. You're asking if my child needs 20 hours a week of coverage. That's the question that we've been asking in the past, not what they're physically working as an individual.
I see what you're saying. Thank you for that, Trevor.
Reeve Bailey.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you, Reeve. The child care costing works well for the full capacity when it's under cost recovery. When it comes down to the lesser children and the extra cost is then put onto the taxpayer base, I have trouble trying to justify that for people in my ward that don't use the Wingham facility, as to now it's going to go on their taxes to help someone that they're not to a benefit that they're not be able to access, much less because it's you're over capacity and you're turning away people as it is now, regardless whether they use it or not. But just when it becomes a tax recovery rather than a cost recovery, that formula doesn't work for all the wards. So I'm just making a comment. Thank you.
Actually, I'm gonna believe we've had this conversation 13 times. Val, did you want to touch on how the costing is formulated and the fact that we have no control of it? Or?
Well, I could update you, Councillor Faulkner, through you, Reeve, that we are hopeful that they will be adjusting the funding formula and that there will be additional funding so that it doesn't cost the tax-based dollars. In the past, we have run deficits, and I guess as a whole, I would say, while the Blythe residents may not reside in Wingham, and some may not use it, some may not use your arenas, but they do fund our arenas. Some may or may not use other services that we provide. But as a whole, as a community and as a township of North Huron, we do tend to support all of the people in working and staying in North Huron, and that's what the child care program does. And hopefully that it would be a short-lived time, that it may cost taxpayers dollars to support it, and even possibly there may be funding to help offset these costs. Unfortunately, the government is choosing to send out information without actually providing us the details. But I think as a council, I recommend that we do support our working families in recovery in trying to get things back to a more normal, and that we be brave and that we try to assist those families in trying to make life more normal again. Like, it's not going to be normal, but families need to go back to work. And I've heard the biggest challenge for even my own childcare staff is finding their childcare arrangements. So I respect that it always does look like it's like when people are paying school taxes and they don't have any kids in school. It's like you can't get too deep into what you're getting out of it and what you're not getting out of it. If you're looking at the package as a whole, I guess is the way I would go with it.
Yeah, just a rebuttal. I was not meaning that as a whole. I was just meaning that at only 40% capacity. Even if they could use it, they can't. That's all I was getting at. Is I'm a more proponent to be in the position where we can offer it to everyone, and not just have to make the decision of who gets it and who doesn't. That tends to be, troublesome.
Yeah,
Thank
it bothers me as well because I've never had to pick and choose specific, like frontline workers versus someone else, and who determines who frontline workers are. So we're really going to have to dig deep into the documents that are provided by the government on all those issues. But we have to start somewhere so that we can prioritize.
Anyone else have a question, comment, or concern? Not hearing any. Carson, I do not believe I asked for a mover yet.
Through your worship, you do have a mover and a seconder already.
Oh, thank you. Then I'm going to hand the reins over to you.
Thank you, worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the Manager of Children's Services dated July 6, 2020 regarding the reopening of childcare at the North Huron Children's Center, and further that Council receives the attached pandemic operating guidelines for information purposes, and further that Council directs staff to reopen the childcare center in July of 2020, and further that Council approves the priority list of childcare spaces as outlined in this report, and further that staff be directed to monitor, evaluate, and report back on additional provincial funding details when they become available. So this will be a recorded vote. Councillor Palmer?
Who?
Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight?
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
I'm going, yes.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Carson. CAO, no report. I thought I read a 3 or 4 page one somewhere. Is that another report?
Under the activity, under
Oh.
the information.
Okay. Thank you. Correspondence. We'll go to correspondence 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3. Open it up to the floor. This is for, I believe, for information.
Through your worship, there's no motion attached to that right now. But as council will see, that is a request we received in response to council's passing of the memorial tree and bench policy. I guess if council wanted, Sean or Vicky could speak to kind of as a reminder of the previous work that went into that tree and bench policy, if it's helpful, or you can just open it up for discussion.
Okay. Sean, did you want to speak to it then?
I can, Your Worship. So, in a nutshell, basically the policy was set up such that memorialization was permitted in the planting of trees or the installation of benches. The one thing that, and it gets into all the details about what benches and where the benches would go and that sort of thing. The way we set it up, though, the benches themselves could and would they would bear a plaque for the memorialization. The trees, on the other hand, would not bear a plaque or have a stone or any marker. So it would be planted by the family, and then and that would be the sum total of the memorialization as far as trees go. So basically, this particular letter speaks to that, or expresses concern with that.
So I'm just gonna add to that a little bit. We did pass this a few months ago, and we actually passed it with Louise in mind. During the conversations, it came up that if you were to put a plaque at the bottom of a tree or by a tree, it lends itself to vandalism. or it lends itself to running it over with a lawnmower when one of the people are cutting the grass. So my recollection was we decided, as Sean has said, to allow them to put a living tree up in memory, but not to put a plaque under, because we can't, as a township, guarantee that it's going to be there in 2 weeks. So then it becomes a how do you win on that one, and that's my understanding. So just touching on that one, I think we've got a good policy. I think we should let it be unless there's someone else has different thoughts. Not hearing of any. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I just noticed one picture there. It showed of Casey Casemore, where it was like a little metal thing put in by the root, the trunk, and his name on it. Is that this to Sean? Is that difficult to buzz around with the lawnmowers, Sean? Like, or do they get beat up by people too?
Through you, as far as the actual maintenance, no, I mean, everybody realizes that you can go around and kind of skirt the base of the tree just as easily incorporate the plaque. The problem is more, as Reeve mentioned, when the plaque is vandalized, when the plaque is stolen, when, you know, and we've recently dealt with a situation very similar where a marker for a memorial disappeared. And even though it's years down the road, these things tend to be, they have a very emotional connection. So,
Kind of lose me.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Councillor Heffer, did you hear that, or?
Sorry, Sean, we're just kind of losing you. You're kicking in.
Okay. Yeah, so the concern is
the last.
Okay, the concern is more after the fact, and we have had situations where if a marker disappears and damage is done, it's very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, understandable. Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns? Do we want to just touch on 8.2 then while we're talking about different things? Township of St. Mary's request everybody wearing a mask. If this thing's airborne, we're going to be doing it whether we want to or not. I personally don't wear a mask all the time, but at one time I didn't wear a seatbelt all the time either. Now it's pretty expensive if I don't. And honestly, you just get used to putting it on. You get in your car and you put it on. Council's thoughts on supporting the Township of St. Mary's on this request?
Through you, Your Worship, I'm just wondering if you want me to provide a little context on because this is something we were copied on, but we felt it prudent to put it on the agenda. So maybe I'll kind of speak to the context of where this came from.
Okay.
So basically, the township or the town of St. Mary's is requesting that Dr. Miriam Clausen, who's the medical officer of health for the Huron Perth Public Health, use her authority to implement an order which would make masks required in social distancing settings, including commercial areas where it cannot be, where proper social distancing cannot be maintained. So what they've done is, you'll see the letter here. What they've done is they've sent a letter to Dr. Clausen, and then they've copied every Huron Perth municipality on that letter. I'm assuming with hopes of supporting them. So that's kind of the context for that, and council can do with that what they please.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Carson. So would council like to support that, or just let that one lie for now? I'm not hearing a response from anybody. Chris, go ahead.
How would it be policed? If we went for it, and I'm not saying it's a bad idea, because our daughter lives in Guelph, and that's what they have to do. But then again, how do you police it?
I guess, I've had some thoughts about this being at the county level too, and that this conversation comes up quite a bit. And again, I'm gonna go back to the seatbelts. It really, they can't enforce the seatbelts. It can save a lot of lives. They do catch the odd fellow like me once in a while. But you just get used to doing it. It's just, once there was that fine hanging over you, you just, and you knew they were looking. But as far as policing it, I totally agree with you, Chris. There's no way, we're not gonna hire people on to make sure they're, we just couldn't afford to. I'm just wondering if it would just be good for us to support it, that's all. Trevor, do you want to talk to that?
My question would be maybe getting some feedback from the BIAs as to relates to how a potential item like this may affect them, or maybe they'd be happy that we're supporting it. I guess I'd rather get some feedback from the business community as opposed to, you know, just making it about whether we think it's the right thing to do, because again, everybody has a different opinion, and I would rather it be kind of funneled through the BIAs to see if they can get some information as to what their thoughts are. If maybe they've had some conversations, their senior management or like their senior board members. I know the Wingham BIA, I know has not. I know they have not had any communication about whether masks are an important thing or not. But again, I know that, you know, some of the counties and municipalities have mandated that, and I'm hearing that there wasn't a lot of consultation as it relates to, you know, the business community of whether they think it's an important factor in their business, or it's a concern or an issue, or what. To answer your question, Reeve, you know, I agree. I would, my comment also is, I agree that if it's going to be mandated by the province, then we're going to mandate it. The concern that we have is that, you know, over a number of years, we've learned to what's the proper way to wear things. People who wear masks, they're not always wearing them properly, and they're not always doing them properly. So they may be doing themselves and the community worse off, but thinking they're doing it good by wearing a mask. So I think ultimately I'm in a position where if we support it, great, but I want to do it based on information that we've got from our municipality and the county that says, you know, we've got some feedback as to relates how to this support would be. Obviously, we're in a good position right now at our level. We don't have the issues that we have that they're happening in Lambton and Toronto and those types of areas, and we don't have this mandatory mandate right now. So are we doing anything harm or doing anything other not implementing it is my question. So that's my comments right there, Eve.
Thank you kindly. Having heard that, would council be good with the council members that sit on the BIAs bringing this before their boards and having the discussion with them and bringing it back, the answers, bring the answer back to council?
Yeah, I think that's.
I agree.
If Paul's good, Kevin's good. I see Rick, you're shaking your head up and down. That's all I got on my screen. I just got staff besides that. Chris, what your thoughts?
My hand was up.
Okay, great. Okay, that's a majority. I can't see the rest of you, but we got a majority there. So council has direction just to, the BIA representatives have direction to bring this up at the next BIA meetings for them and bring back a report. Okay, thank you very kindly. Okay, we're going to move on to the cross-border servicing requests from John Green. It's unfortunate what happened to Green's Meat Market, and we all want to support them in their endeavor to rebuild. I've been down that road one time myself, as I sent an email out to you folks. I can remember my store burning, and I had to rebuild my life with it. So I do understand more than anybody. Trevor Hamill from Morris Turnberry sent him a letter saying that, sent somebody a letter saying that they're hoping that we could hook it up because we almost have an agreement with them. I believe it was right in the letter. I'm going to suggest that this council has decided there would be no hookups until we have a deal with them. We also know that Hodgins have requested and they haven't got a hookup, and I heard there's another one coming down the pipe, the third one. We were told by Morris Turnberry that it wasn't a hurry because they had no hookups, but life just turned this way. I'm going to recommend strongly that we have a motion on the floor that says, or we passed a motion saying no hookups until the deal's done, and I hope that Morris Turnberry comes to the table rather fast. We've asked them to get back to us on the fact that we've tried 2 or 3 different items with them, and all I want to know at this point, all we want to know is your team that's doing your negotiating is what they don't like about the deal. Tell us so we can work it out. Go ahead, Paul.
Could we have a little discussion about that?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Well, I feel it's just like Val was saying, we want to get people back to work, and I feel this is a step that we could show. I have a neighbor across from me, taxpayers in our municipality that are paying taxes, and we want to get them back to work. They work there. I feel that it's a way of getting, this is important. A company's gone down, they set up their house as their office there, and I feel it's only proper to me. There's no reason not to let that go. That is my reasoning on that.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else?
Chris.
I'm going to go Chris first, and then Kevin.
2 things, I guess. One, we're dealing with a business, and we still have service with them, septic, I guess. Cheapers, why not? We're dealing with a company who have people that live in our community, and this is a point I think it'd be really good to show some good faith on our part. Hey, if it doesn't go anywhere in the good faith department, we'll remember that. But this is an opportunity, and it's a business, and I want them to get going, and this is one way.
I appreciate that, Chris. I would like to point out to everybody, it's my understanding they do have water now. This is not holding anything up. They would just like to hook onto our services. So very, very clearly, they do have water now. It's a residential home that they're asking, not the business. The business will be a while getting up and going. It was a catastrophe. It was such a shame to hit the greens like that. Before I go to you, Paul, Kevin had his hand up first.
Sorry.
Thank you, through your Reeve. Yes, it's a business, and it's a residence that they're wanting to hook up. It's not a business in our municipality. The hang up is not with our municipality. We would like to work with them on many more endeavors as far as hookup, but with no agreement, that leaves you quite hanging out in the middle of nowhere. It's no different if in Brampton asked us to hook up. Are we gonna? Would you consider that? It's an agreement. They're using it as a bargaining chip against us as much as we would use it as a bargaining chip for our side. I side for our side in the negotiation. It's their municipality. It's something they should have thought of having recourse in case of any emergency that would happen. But just to leave it to the point where there's no agreement and no real possibility at this point of coming to a conclusion. We're no more closer than we were when we started. So I would say it's they should take that up with their municipality and their council.
Go to you now, Paul.
Yes, it is a house, but they've turned that into their office. So let's be clear on that. And the lady, my neighbor, said they have to use the toilet porta potty outside. I don't know about you, but when we have water right there, it's a hookup, and we're wanting money for infrastructure. That came up. I just feel that we're not being making a decision that could benefit both sides.
Appreciate that, Paul. I would also like to point out on this conversation that the cross-border agreement was defunct before this council started sitting. We don't want to be in this position. This is not what I envisioned when I wanted to talk a deal with them. I wanted to talk a deal with them. This agreement was defunct before this council started sitting. That's how long I've been working on this. This is how long your team's been working on this. I apologize for saying I. This is how long your team's been working on this. We need them to come to the table. It's not us. We're not the bad guys. We just spent $118,000 at that end of town to supply water out that way. We want to work with them. So they need to come to the table. We need to make an agreement. And if we can't make an agreement, I can tell you right now, I handed out to every one of you and every one of the counselors at Morris Turnberry, the agreement. I believe it was either 9 or 11. I've got it sitting over here. Different municipalities that have come to an agreement, all except one. And I believe it was Hanover and West Gray cannot come to an agreement. And for 20 years, West Gray has not been able to hook up. They don't even come to them anymore because they wouldn't couldn't come to an agreement. We are more than willing to sit down with them tomorrow and discuss it. We sent a letter saying, what is wrong with the deal? And they sent it back and they didn't answer that. So I don't know what to tell you. We are acting, your committee is acting on council given direction, which is no more hookups until we have a deal. Nothing's changed. Okay, anyone else? Not hearing any, we're gonna move on. Reeves activity report. Go ahead, Paul.
Excuse me, we don't have a vote on that when they ask for it?
Through your worship, that's correct. There's a motion on the floor right now. So I guess the committee could either, or the council could either receive this for information, or someone could put a motion forward based on the direction, and that can be put to a vote. But at this point, staff need direction on how to respond to Morris Turnberry.
Well, I thought I made a motion there through you.
Sorry, I didn't. Okay, go ahead and remake it, please. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I did not hear that.
I'd like to make a motion that we grant this request immediately.
Do I have a seconder?
Chris?
Chris is seconding. Any more discussion? Hearing none. Carson, I'll let you do the roll call.
Thank you, your worship. So the motion on the floor is that the council of the township of North Huron hereby grants the request, the cross-border servicing request to John Green immediately. So this will be a recorded vote. So Deputy Reeve Sight. Councillor Falconer.
No.
Councillor Heffer.
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum.
No.
Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
Councillor McBurney. And Reeve Bailey.
No.
So that motion carries 5-2, or fails 5-2. Sorry, with the noes being Reeve Bailey, Deputy Reeve Sight, Councillor Falconer, Councillor McBurney, and Councillor Van Hittersum.
Okay. Moving on then.
So through your worship, I'm just wondering if, because that motion was defeated, I'm wondering if council wants to maybe pass a motion that it was received for information purposes or something at this time, just so staff have some direction.
Okay, sure. Yep. Would somebody like to put that motion forward?
Motion to receive the information for information purposes.
Kevin is first and Rick is seconding it. Any questions or comments on that? Not seeing any. I'm going to hand it over to you again, Carson.
Thank you, your worship. So the motion on the floor is that the council of the township of North Huron hereby receives the request, the cross-border servicing request for information purposes. So this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor Falconer. Councillor Falconer.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Councillor Heffer.
No.
Councillor Van Hittersum.
Yes.
Councillor Palmer.
For information, yes.
Councillor McBurney.
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight.
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 6-1 with the no being Councillor Heffer.
Okay, thank you. Reeves activity report. I actually didn't get a chance to put an activity report together yet. At the county level, we're still working on getting fiber all through Erie County, all through what they call the western Wardens through the Western Wardens Caucus. Personally, I'm kind of questioning why we're spending so much money on meetings when we could actually be burying fiber, but I'm sure somebody will explain that to me at the next council meeting, county council meeting. The staff have been very, very busy, as you heard tonight. We have 100 miles an hour. Dwayne tried to get a day off. He asked for a day off, and I had to email him 2 or 3 times. Dwayne, I do apologize in open council. I really tried to give you that day off, 2 days off, and you didn't get any of them. I'll try harder next time. I appreciate everything you guys do. I truly do. That's about it for me. So we're just going to keep moving it right along. Council member reports, verbal or written updates from members who sit on the boards or committees. Go ahead, Trevor, and then Paul. Trevor?
Is it me? Sorry,
yes. Yeah, Trevor. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, more of I attempted to very excited or very happy about the EOC committee continuing to make progress, continuing to make questions and comments about where we are going with limited information. I do want to say thank you to Dave Clark. He has been a valuable asset to the committee as it relates to the information that we're getting, as it relates to the provincial orders and the mandates that are coming down from the province. Again, I'd like to thank staff in order to, facilitating this difficult time and understanding that, we as a council and staff we have ultimately been united in the sense that we want to be open as soon as possible, but we want to do it safely and effectively. So, I've been fielding some calls about, splash pads and those types of things. I've made it very clear that we have a plan. We are working through that plan with staff. The EOC is making those plans and providing, not necessarily providing direction, just providing input. That is what we are doing as part of the deputy reeve and the reeve on that committee. We are not making decisions for council. We're just providing input as to where we think, questions need to come to council or suggestions. But any service that we have provided, I just want to make sure that's clear to all of council that any service that the municipality offered pre-COVID-19, the expectation is if the province allows it to open, it will open. We are not telling them to stop. We're not telling them to change it. If financially it's not something that's available, it will be coming to council as a directive. The EOC is not making those calls. Staff are not making those calls in order to close a program or change something. They don't have that authority. Only council has that authority. So I want to make sure that we're clear from an EOC perspective that we are providing, me and the reeve are providing feedback, but ultimately my hope is that I'm there too, and Reeve is there as a portion of a point of contact for when he gets questions from from newspapers and those types of things. But I'm there also to support, to make sure that if it needs to come to council, that it's coming to council, and making sure that you as councilors are updated on a frequent basis about where we are as it comes to services that we have offered pre-COVID-19 and where we are today. So I just wanted to pass that along. And the other thing I did want to say is I did want to say thank you so much to the Wingham Community Connectors Group. We did not have, I would say we had a successful event. Me and Paul participated in a trivia challenge that the Wingham Community Connectors on. I can honestly say that I'm not very good at Canadian history or Canadian trivia that I thought I did. I know sports, but other than that, I'm not very good. So I would say thank you to the Wingham Community Connectors for their virtual thought about how do we make community together and how do we celebrate Canada Day in North Huron in the best way we can under these circumstances. So I would like to thank them on behalf of myself and anybody else that would that participated in that night, because it was a good fun 40 minutes of that. I really enjoyed it. So thank you, Reeve.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, I just say diddles to what Trevor said, and they reminded Trevor he should be going to the library a bit more, but that's all right. But the Canada Day night, I just want to thank the firemen for going around. It made a lot of kids happy and some bigger kids too. It was really great just to see that it went on, just a great work by the connectors group there and getting it. They just want the best for the community. I'd just like to give a quick report of Sustainable Huron. Again, met virtual, but they're talking about what's going on in the county with employed and whatnot. But for every 100 people retiring, there's only 70 people to replace them. So they've taken the numbers over the last 3 years. In the ag and forestry, there's approximately 4,600 people, and it's estimated they're minus 24% or 1,124 less. Like they've just retired out of it. Manufacturing, it's not so bad, but they're again 3,300, but again 10% have gone out of it. I'm just taking the top 4 numbers that I want to pick out here. And the wholesale, retail, and trade, again 4,400 people, and 31% have gone out, or 1,400 people. And the only different one and we can see that in things that we're hearing now, is healthcare and social assistance. And there's 3,200 people working there, and they went up plus 3.4%, or 109 more working in that. Again, these are guesstimates in the county, but they're pretty close. So of the 30,000 plus employed, they're down over 5,000 people. So that's how they came up with those numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to anything? Not here. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm not sure. I just wanted to acknowledge that the OPP have moved into Clinton, correct?
Yes.
And have left our community, correct?
Yes.
Is there any further discussion, or are we just saying, great?
I apologize for not touching on that. So the mayor of South Huron, George Finch, and myself have been working as a team because they pulled out of Exeter too. So in their mandate is to protect us, and they did say a couple years ago on CTV, they did say that they would do their job, and there would be a place in both of our towns to come to the OPP, and there's not. So we've closed the local police, and we've closed the OPP station. A few concerns with that. Number one, we've had a couple OPP officers that have died in car accidents with no other cars involved, which means they're racing from one end of Huron County to the other to help out, because they too are there's not a lot of OPPs. I think there's 4 on duty at all times. Everybody's being thinned out, but it's not helping them, and it's not helping us. And especially when I say us, if we have family disputes or domestic disputes, or even if you want to have a credit check or an ID check, you can't anymore get it in Wingham, where I used to be able to get it right down at the local police station. We're missing out on too much. So we need them back. The problem is, here we go again. It's not in our mandate to pay for it. We're already paying the OPP a lot of money, and they're to do a certain job. So if they feel that they don't need that facility, then I'm not sure why they want to come to us and ask us to pay for a facility to be in Wingham, which will also take care of all the surrounding area, because that's the way policing works. So our thoughts between the 2 mayors and what we've worked out, and we've sent it off to so this is not a local Huron County OPP decision either, by the way. This is from Aurelia. Somebody in Aurelia decided to do this, and Trevor might be better off with names than I am, because as you know, I never get a name proper. But at the end of the day, here we go again. No, North Huron cannot afford to pay for policing for all the local municipalities to use too. Yes, we do need it. Yes, the local police force understands they need it. We just have to convince the OPP out of the Aurelia office that it should be back where it was here, where it was before. so that you can go in when you need help. When there's a snowstorm, the OPP doesn't have to try to drive to Clinton in a snowstorm and closed highways and get himself hurt. He can be in this area and help us. And they also need a place to rest, and they need a place to do their book work. Honestly, they spent 40 or $50 million on a building in Clinton. Surely to God, somebody was thinking about, what about the other communities in the area? Trevor, you may want to touch on that a bit. I don't mean to put you on the spot. You don't have to if I've touched on it, but if you want to, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely correct, Chris. So, Chris, the question has been when they broke ground in 2018, they had made it perfectly clear that they thought the satellite offices in Clinton, or the satellite offices in South Huron and in Wingham, North Huron, were going to close. They made that perfectly clear at that time. They did mention that they thought that there would be some satellite offices or some storefront offices maintained. They have not communicated anything to that effect, and really there was no real confirmation that that was going to close until about 2 weeks before it actually closed. So, the lack of communication has been, I would argue, is a frustrating part from not only the municipality but the Police Services Board. I would also argue that the detachment commander wasn't very happy with the communication that I call, or that he talked to me about, just because it was a provincial, that closure is a provincial discussion. It's not necessarily, it's a West Region discussion. It's an OPP higher level discussion. So there is some concern, as Reeve has mentioned, about health and safety. The Huron detachment had requested some space in the fire hall. We have pushed that back and said that's not really your position here in detachment to request that. The fact that you just closed a satellite office that you could have used, that's the West Region. So we pushed this back to them. I've pushed out an email tonight to the Police Services Board to provide them some some feedback as to relate to information that's been going on. This is a discussion. This is an OPP internal issue. This is not a North Huron issue with the Huron detachment of the OPP. I think based on the service that we've been getting, I think it's the service we have been getting is top notch, and I don't have any concerns with the service. I've not been heard anything from any ratepayer as it relates to the service of the OPP. What this is an internal issue with the OPP, and we're trying to leave it as an internal situation and not get involved in it. And that's where I think we are doing that. And I think the Reeve and South Huron's mayor are taking. South Huron's mayor is the one who's leading this fight. So he's leading this fight. He just needs somebody to back him up. And I think, me as a deputy Reeve and the Reeve, not necessarily talking for council, but I think we all can honestly agree that if we had something before and we don't have it now, and the concern is, are we going to get a lack of service in the future? And I would argue if we do see a lack of service that we're not getting, that we were getting before, we need to be voicing those concerns from the Police Services Board and to the detached commander so that he can understand and he can pass those information on to the people that need to happen.
Thank you, Trevor. Hey, Chris, anyone else have anything they'd like to chat about? Not seeing any. I believe I'm down to a notice of motion and there's none. And then we have bylaws. So, Carson, I'm just going to hand it over to you because it's got to be done, recorded anyway.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess if you want to get a mover and a seconder first, and then I'll read the bylaw.
Okay, who'd like to move this?
I'll make the motion to move.
Gabby's going to move. Who's going to second? I have Paul. Paul second. Okay, here we go.
So the motion on the floor is that bylaw 44/2020 being a bylaw to authorize a site plan control agreement between the Corporation of the Township of North Huron and Rod Critch and Joan Critch, 466 and 470 Josephine Street, Wingham, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the Reeve and clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. So, Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight? Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heifer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Oh, my turn. Thank you very kindly. Announcements. The next regular council meeting will be held on Monday, July 20th, 2020 at 6 p.m. through electronic participation unless notified otherwise. The next North Huron Economic Development and Recovery Committee meeting will be held on Thursday, July 9th, 2020 at 8 a.m. through the electronic participation. Wingham BIA and Blythe BIA meetings will continue to be held through electronic participation during the declared state of emergency. All other committees and board meetings remain suspended until further notice. Other business, has anybody got any other business they'd like to add to the agenda for next time or anything? Not hearing of any. Closed session and reporting out. The Council Township of North Huron hereby proceeds at 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. to an in-camera meeting closed to the public to discuss the following: personal matters about an identifiable individual, including a municipal or board, local board employee, labor relationships, and employee negotiations, COVID-19 layoffs, and the position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried out on or to be carried out on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, cross-border services agreement. Do I have a mover? Going to close.
I'll make that motion, Kevin.
I have Chris and Kevin. I'll hand it over to you, Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So you just read the motion, so I won't go through that. So this will be a recorded vote. So Deputy Reeve Syke.
Yes.
Councillor Falconer. Councillor Heifer.
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson.
Yes.
Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
Councillor McBurney.
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
That motion carries 7-0. So I'll end this open session meeting now and start up the closed session one.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Sean.